He has wiped out by his grace through faith in Christ your every sin, past, present, future.
Christian hedonist is somebody who says that my greatest joy, my greatest good is God. And therefore, I will pursue that joy and I will pursue that God above all else. So God's glorified and I'm satisfied.
You are now listening to the Pastor Discussions Podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode number 56 of the Pastor Discussions Podcast. I'm John.
And I'm Joe, and this is your weekly conversation on doctrine, faith, and the Christian life.
What's going on, man?
It is the wrong day
Thursday.
to be recording.
I can't believe we're recording on a Thursday.
It's good. It's good. It's been, although we just moved all of Amanda's crap.
Yeah, we did. So our secretary,
she's leaving us.
She's abandoning us.
She's starting her own business.
She has decided that she's gonna sell flowers in York,
which is probably it'll be good.
Yeah, well, for her. It's really. I think it's so. So we've hired somebody new,
mm-hmm.
and I'm excited about that, but sad to see Amanda go. So it's like this weird tension where it's like, okay, like I really enjoyed having Amanda here, and she is really great, and we have that good rapport, and she understands everything, and so everything works out really well. And so I'm excited for her that she's leaving. I'm sad that she's leaving though, but then I'm also excited for this new person that's coming in because I think she'll be really great and do a really great job. And so there's this weird tension, this weird space that we're in right now where it's like, I don't want to like dote over Amanda because then it'll make this other person feel like, oh, I'm stepping into this role I can never stand or like step up to that. And then I don't want to dote on this new person because then Amanda's been like, oh, they don't care about me. So it's weird.
They're just going to forget about me immediately.
He's gone forever. See them on Sundays just from the pew.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's, so that's happening. That is happening. Yeah. So,
and you're leaving?
Yeah. Everybody's leaving.
Seems like a while.
Yeah.
I get to preach 2 weeks in a row.
I know,
I'm
right?
kind of excited about that.
I'm excited for that too. I'm excited to hear it. So yeah, I'm going to, Springfield, Missouri this Sunday, which is why we're recording early.
Which will be yesterday.
Oh, I got to tell you about this. I'm so excited about this. This is a big deal. Okay. So one of the things on my bucket list that I want to do before I die is time travel. Okay. I got my itinerary for Mongolia, my flight itinerary. I leave Seoul, South Korea at 10 o'clock a.m. on March 4th. I arrive at my destination, which I think is Chicago, at 9:59 a.m.
the same day
on March 4th. I get to time travel. So I will be checking that one off my bucket list. So, anyway, going to Springfield to preach this Sunday, and then we're going on vacation because Carly has a conference that she's going to, and I'm going to take the kids, and we're going to walk around Washington, D.C. in the middle of January while the government shut down.
And then right after that, we're going to Minneapolis.
Yeah, right after that, we're going to Minneapolis. This is like this next couple of months is just kind of like crazy schedule.
You're telling me.
It doesn't end for me until this baby's born in April.
That's about when it ends for me too. Because that's when I get to stop covering for
all of our things affect one another. So true. So it'll be good. But so you get to preach and teach Sunday school.
Yeah.
And
so I'm looking forward to next week.
Yeah.
Not this week. So
why not this week?
Because I just don't like what I'm preaching on. So.
Oh yeah. Well, everybody will have heard it. So you don't like preaching on money.
Yeah, but they won't.
Why don't you like preaching on money?
Because it's like, I can't get past the self-serving part of it. If I didn't work, like if I was going to somebody else's church where I wasn't employed by them, I wouldn't have any problem. It
seems like a conflict of interest?
Yeah. Okay. Like it seems like a self-serving thing.
Gotcha.
So I'm just going to say that on the front, and then I'm going to be like, I'm going to be blunt. So,
but this is what the Bible says, yo.
Yeah. So compare yourself to this. If you don't match up to that, well, that's not my fault.
Repent.
That's the Spirit convicting you, not Joe. So
that's good. No, I think it'll be good. It's good to to preach on things that are hard for us to preach on. It stretches us. And I felt that way a little bit, I think the first time that I preached on giving, because it does seem self-serving. I mean, you're employed by the church, your livelihood comes from the church. It seems like you're saying, hey, give more so that I can, eat more or feed my family or whatever.
Or buy a nice big sports car.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and to be honest, like I do think that maybe this is our conversation for the day.
Just turn into whatever. This is how our conversations normally go. Yeah. So we have an agenda, and then
we deviate from it. Do you think that the prosperity gospel stuff has played a role in that? Like the preachers that are like, they focus on giving so much.
I think that has something to do with it, but I also think there's this thought that, especially in the culture that we live in, that pastors are supposed to be live in a poor state.
Yeah, poverty.
Like they're supposed to not have, you're supposed to be humble. So we're going to keep you humble type of an attitude.
89 Ford Taurus kind of humble.
Yeah, that kind of humble. Which I'm not saying that we have to have the nice new car or anything like that or a big house, but we should be able to live
2 ditches.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So you've got the poverty guys, and you've got the prosperity gospel guys. And what I'm saying is, no, we should be taking care of our pastors in the same way we should be taking care of any employee that works for the church, whether it be, some churches have janitorial staff. Some churches have, we have a secretary. Most churches have that. Yeah. Like, do we take care of those people, or is our mindset, how much can we get for as little as we can get?
Yeah.
Like, and so, that mindset's a part of ministry. And then when you hear people preach on it, I think people are sensitive about it. They don't want to be poked in the eye about these things because they've got plans and they've got, like, I'm starting to go into my sermon here. So, but they've got plans and they've got these ideas on what their life should be like, and they've got goals, right? Mm-hmm. And so having to give things away, whether that be our time or our abilities or our resources, our finances, our money, like those things are an inconvenience a lot of times to the goals that we have. Mm-hmm. So, it comes down ultimately to self-centeredness, but then we look at people in the church, you're like, well, you're not really supposed to have that much. You knew that when you were getting into it. And I think that's, we did. I could be doing a different job that pays me a lot more. Mm-hmm. I was a 15-year journeyman electrician. I probably could have been running my own business if I wanted to.
Right.
But I was called to do this instead. But that doesn't mean that I have to like drag myself through every little thing. Like, we're still called to take care of those who minister to us.
So don't muzzle the ox while he's treading out the grain. Right. So you grain treader, you need to be treading grain, but without a muzzle. Mm-hmm. Like, there's the workman is worthy of his wages. I mean, there's a biblical precedent for this. So I don't think what you're saying is wrong. I think that the difficulty comes from sort of the inconsistency. So what you were just saying, people's attitudes toward money can be very self-centered and very like, I earned this.
Right.
This is mine. I have plans for it, everything else. And there's almost this inconsistency where it's like, I'm able to provide for my family and provide a comfortable standard of living for myself because I work. Pastors don't really work. So we'll just give them the minimum that they need to get by. And it's almost like this different view of money where it's like, I can work hard to accumulate wealth, to provide a comfortable standard of living for my family. You can kind of like work hard in whatever it is that you do, but you're going to stay sort of down here. You need to be humble.
Right.
Yeah.
What
doesn't factor into that is like a few things. Number one, we're called to be generous as well.
Right.
So there's sort of an underlying assumption that if we make too much, we'll get prideful or won't be effective, or I don't know what it is. Yeah. But so there's that. Then there's the other aspect of being able to provide for your family, and it's like, well, you don't need much. You don't need to,
right.
Why doesn't your wife work? that's a question that I've heard, or things like that. So it's a weird space to be in.
Yeah, and Scripture doesn't take into account the culture that we live in. So there's like people expect now, and with where wages are at, where we're at versus cost, most people, both adults have to work.
Yeah.
Both mom and dad, both husband and wife are out working. Well, we're also called, we're complementary. And so we think that like primary roles for husband would be provider, protector, and wife, nurturer, helper, supporter, equal roles, or equal in value, just different in role.
Yeah.
And so some of us want our wives to be able to stay home, especially when our kids are real little.
Yeah.
And be able to fulfill that role, let's nurture our kids, let's raise them, in the admonition and instruction of the Lord. So why would we not, people look at that and they say, well, I can't, and here, that's the other thing. Like there's a self-centeredness to it. Well, we're not able to do that. So why should you be able to do that? That can be the mentality we have versus, so it still goes back to, that generosity thing. And have you been freed from the self-centeredness of your sin and your flesh and the things that pull you to the desires of the world? To what have you been freed? If you've been freed from that, what are you going to do with that? Are you going to do exactly what you were doing before? No, you're going to be generous. Like the gospel actually frees you to be generous. So it's just one of those things that we really, really struggle with. Money. I mean, okay, so money's hard, right?
Yeah.
Like we have fights over
hard to get into heaven.
That, yeah, but so
that's a tack you ought to take on your sermon. Look, this is just a hindrance to your eternal or your entry into eternal glory. If you give your money away, you'll get into heaven.
Now I'm starting to sound like a prosperity gospel preacher right there. No, so I'm like, but money tricks us. It deceives us, and so the world says around us, well, you need to be at this stage by this age to be on this trajectory. You have to have this kind of house at this age and this kind of car at this certain spot in your life. And so people have these goals, right? And so what winds up happening is we sacrifice everything in probably what I would say is the most important time in our lives is when our kids are little and growing up. And we sacrifice doing anything with our kids because we're thinking about these end goals. And in that, we don't give up our time. A lot of us have abilities and we won't use them for ways that are going to bless other people. So there's just this constant self-centeredness, and like believers have been freed from the pull on those things to give them away.
Yeah.
To reflect Christ in his generosity, we should be generous as well. So as we walk through this life, it's so amazing to me that when it comes to money or it comes to our plans, we're so self-centered and we hold on to those things so tight. But then, and this is where it gets awkward because we're in an awkward spot because our salary as vocational ministry comes from those people.
Yeah.
And so it's hard that's where I get awkward. It's like, because you're poking at people who are the ones who are providing your salary or your means of providing for your family.
Yeah.
That was a really random, all over the place thought, but.
Well, and it comes down to that, like, so Paul said he voluntarily forwent what was owed to him, is the way he phrases it. Is there's this in God's economy.
Yeah.
There's this principle where those that labor in the preaching and teaching of the word are worthy of double honor. Now, I don't know of any pastor worth his salt that would approach it from a standpoint of entitlement, and sort of like a guilt trippy type of, hey, you should be paying me more because I'm laboring. So whatever you guys make, double it and give that to me.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? That's not what it's getting at. But at the same time, Scripture does make it very clear that there is a responsibility that the church has to provide for their pastors that are ministering the word, not only to the congregation, but that are equipping them. Sort of Ephesians 4 plays into this too, because the work of the ministry is equipping people or the work of pastors is to equip people to do the work of ministry. Right. So it's kind of like, the pastors are freed from the burden of providing for their family with a full-time job outside of church in order to be able to devote themselves full-time to the church. And I think that our philosophies of ministry play into this too a little bit, because when we talk about, this is now a random conversation, but when we talk about this, like, how do we quantify a productive or hardworking pastor? Is it somebody that is in the middle of every single event that is happening, or that's organizing events, or that has, 17 different ministry structures that he's got his hands in, or something like that? Is that productive, hardworking ministry? And what you were saying a minute ago is, we're all believers, including pastors, are to use their times, their talents, and their treasures. I think that's the typical way of putting it. The transliterated.
That's a better way.
T's.
I should have to. I should make that note.
Doing sermon prep here.
I didn't use talents either, so.
Well, abilities. Yeah. So times, talents, and treasures, whatever. Yeah. For advancing the kingdom, right? But I think a lot of people think that their time for advancing the kingdom equates to, when we preach these things or when we teach these things, equates to showing up at events at the church. Mm-hmm. And I don't think you or I would, either one of us would say that's what giving of your time is. Because I guess my point is, like, what people can struggle with is, if I give my time to the church, then I'm basically going to be at the church every event.
But see, and
that's not what we're getting at.
No, like, do you have time to, when you're driving, like, okay, so here's a great example. We stuff our calendars so full, right? Mm-hmm. Right or wrong, I'm not going to argue that, but we stuff them so full that when we see somebody, like, okay, somebody's on the side of the road, an old lady or a young lady or whoever it is, or a random person is on the side of the road and they blew their tire out. Because our time is so, like, we squash anything in that we can. We don't have time to, hey, that guy needs help.
Yeah.
And in my helping him, I'm actually I'm proclaiming the gospel by randomly stopping and say, hey, I'm going to help you. I'm going to take time so I can do ministry to help you.
Time is money.
Right. Time is money. It really is. Like, we hear that all the time if you're in the business world, but it is. And that's how you make money, is by spending time, but that's also how you lose money, is by spending too much time doing stuff.
Well, and this is my point though. My point is that those types of things happen outside of a normal thing, a normal church rhythm, and nobody might know about it.
Right.
And in the same way, there's a lot of stuff that goes into ministry, vocational pastoral ministry, that happens outside of the building that nobody maybe knows about. And so when we think about these things, when we think about paying pastors, when we think about being involved in church, when we think about giving of our time, talent, our abilities, using our gifts, right? We always think of them in terms of the building. We always think of them in terms of organizational ministry. And I think that's actually a real barrier to us being generous, because we can be like, well, I don't know how I fit into that. They've already got 3 ministry leaders that are leading that. I don't know how to use my gifts.
We also do the same thing with our resources, our treasures, our money is, well, I'm just going to give to the church. Well, there's other things that we could be supporting and being generous with our resources. Like, there's families throughout our community that could use gifts during any time of the year. Mm-hmm. And so it's not like, the thing I'm going to try to point out anyway is that it's not about being at church or giving to the church or using your gifts for the church. I think that it includes that, but it also includes this is part of ministry. This is part of the lifestyle that believers have because they've been made new. So we've not been made new to be the same.
Yeah.
And to look like the rest of the world, but we've been made new to look different and to be generous with everything that God has gifted us with in all assets, in every area of our life.
Yeah.
So it's just hard to.
So including but not limited to, showing up to church and giving to the church.
Right. So should we do those things? Sure.
Yeah.
We should. We should gather with other believers. We're called to do that, but we're also called to invite our neighbors over for dinner.
Yeah.
And evangelize to them and actually care about them. We're called to love our neighbors as ourselves. Like, do we take those things seriously? And are we generous enough to give our time and our abilities and our resources away for the hope that we can share the gospel with somebody?
So that sort of stinginess when it comes to, or potential stinginess when it comes to viewing our finances is also evident in those two other areas of our lives.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We're stingy with our money because we have plans for it and we have aims for it. We're stingy with our time because we have plans for it.
But sometimes we're seemingly, from an outside perspective, not stingy with our money.
Yeah.
But are you giving out of, like, if you're going to talk about money, are you giving out of the abundance that you have been blessed with?
Yeah.
Or are you giving sacrificially, and it takes faith to give the amount that you give?
Yeah.
So we can look at people from an outside perspective that was, well, this person gives a lot of money, but are they, and this person doesn't give much. But like Luke 21 with the rich men that are coming in and putting their offerings in the box, and then you've got this old widow that comes and puts these 2 coins in. It was always about that these men are not generous because they're giving. It doesn't take sacrifice. It doesn't take faith. It doesn't hurt them at all to give that. And it was everything that this woman had to give it. Her attitude is what it was about. So we can't get hung up in, like, because I think a lot of people say, well, I can be generous with my money. But then it proves out that they're not actually being generous because they're not generous with their time and they're not generous with the abilities that they have.
Yeah.
And it's a facade of, it looks like generosity, but it's also not generosity. It's just it becomes a duty and a legalistic thing that we have to do. And, well, we're supposed to give our money to the church, so we're going to do this, but that's it.
Yeah.
So,
well, and that's I guess when you sort of boil it down to practical things, generosity then might be, generosity flows from love.
Right. You're preaching my sermon here, but generosity and love are always tied together. Genuine love and generosity are always tied together. We see that in Christ. We see that in God. He gave his son because he loved, and so he needed to make a way for us to be with him. So there's this sacrifice. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us.
Yeah.
God shows his love for us, and while we're still sinners.
Yeah.
So, yeah, absolutely. I don't know where I was going with that.
The end. That's how you should end the sermon.
No, my sermon is definitely more structured.
It's manuscripted.
Yes, it is. It's loosely manuscripted. So I allow myself to go on rants. It's like my reading habits with scripture.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'll just read. And so I'm going to read. But if I get stuck here and something stands out, I just allow myself to go into that rant for a little while, and then I'll get back on track. So
then how can people use their, let's stay away from money for a second. I think it was last week in the sermon, I said something to the effect of the church is not the building, the church is the people. Right. So, how can we serve the church? How can we advance the gospel with our time and our talents and be generous with those things then? If we have the mindset of the church is the building and the organization.
Well, don't have that mindset.
I think that's the shift that needs to happen in a lot of people, because I think there might be a desire to be generous.
Things
feeling like I don't know how to step into that because all those roles are already taken.
So just so we don't go into the other ditch, things can still happen in the church building.
Yeah.
Like,
we're not
we
saying
can
that.
still do ministry here. It's not tied to, so.
I just don't want somebody that's not involved in, like, let's say let's just say let's say your church only does Sunday morning and Wednesday night, just for the sake of simplicity in this argument. But for somebody that's not involved in ministry, formal ministry, church, formal organizational ministry on Sunday morning or Wednesday night, I don't want them to feel like, oh, well, I guess I don't have a place.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So I'm not saying that those things are bad. I'm just saying, like, for those people that have gifts that maybe don't align with those types of things.
So I can just give a real simple example of one that I'm walking through at the moment. My girls got the opportunity. I have a third and a second grader to play on a basketball team. And I wasn't going to coach because generally, I mean, it takes time. I don't have a lot of it. But I've actually coached little girls before. I got the opportunity when I was a lot younger than I am now to coach some girls who were fourth graders, and I stuck with them all the way through seventh grade. So I've got some experience. I have some ability. I know how to talk with kids. So I've got this talent that God's given me that's been to interact with young people and to make them feel at ease and comfortable and communicate with them.
By bribing them with cookies.
No, I haven't done that yet.
That's what you do with my kids. Every time we come in here now, Finley's like, can I have some of those cookies? I want the chocolate ones.
I didn't give any to them last time. I told her no. So, okay. So, but I wasn't going to coach this group. And, through one of the guys that helped me coach back in the day, he was an assistant, is his granddaughter's in this group, and he wanted me to come and help out. And as that happened, it just kind of morphed into, okay, I can do this. Like, I can sacrifice the time that it's going to take, and I've got the abilities to do it. So it was something that I didn't want to do. I didn't want to be generous with my time. I had other things that I could be doing with that. But what I realized as we started doing it is that what I'm doing here with these 9 other girls that I don't know their parents and they don't know me, and I don't know them yet, but I get to build relationships with them. And this is an opportunity to actually do ministry by coaching little third grade girls. It's also really, really frustrating at times when like this group didn't know anything about basketball when they started, but it's also super encouraging to see how much they've grasped and caught on and done things, and how we can encourage them through every single thing, and the opportunities that could possibly lead to speaking into parents' lives of those kids, speaking into those kids' lives too. Like, are we willing to take a step back and see in these opportunities that God gives us that there are opportunities to do ministry?
Yeah.
Or I'm just coaching basketball. Well, don't look at it like that. I mean, if you got an ability and you've got the time, which we can make time for most anything if we really think about it.
If we value it.
Yeah, if we value it. And so if you got those two things, well, go use them.
Who was it that when we did the episode with Post Tenebris Lex, he was talking about getting into Bible rebinding, and the pastor that he had said, do you have the passion?
Yeah.
Do you have the ability? And I think those were the two main things. I think there was one other. I can't remember. The resources.
Yeah.
The passion, the ability, and the resources. And he did, so he obviously did that.
Yeah.
But even what he was saying, like, he views that as ministry. Yeah. And so when we come to, because what I'm preaching on this Sunday is Ephesians chapter 4, and equipping the saints for the work of ministry, when we're not going to be generous with our time or with our treasure or with our talents if we view ministry as being done by the pastors and not by the people. Because at that point, they're a hireling that comes and does it so that I don't have to.
Yeah.
Generosity comes from, I get to be a part of the advancement of the gospel through being generous with these things. And my generosity with these things is really ministry.
Right. And I'm in 2 Corinthians 8, and that's exactly what this church in Macedonia, they understood that. And the reason they so wanted to be a part of it is they understood this is ministry.
Yeah.
We're actually getting to partake in this ministry by being generous.
So would you say that an aspect of generosity then in these areas would be redeeming those three things: redeeming time, redeeming talents, redeeming treasure? Let me explain what I mean by that for those that are, because I know you know what I'm talking about, but somebody that's listening might not, because we've had these conversations about redeeming, reject, receive, redeem a lot. Yeah. But if you have let's just take this for example, what you just said. You have a talent or ability to coach basketball.
Yeah.
You're redeeming that by doing it and repurposing it for a goal and using that to work toward a goal of ministering to parents, ministering to these kids. If you like going to, if you make time to go to your kid's football game, you can redeem that through intentionally sitting next to another family that goes to that football game that has a kid playing for the purpose of not just watching your kid play, but building that relationship to share the gospel.
So your calendar can be stuffed full.
Exactly. You don't have to change. You don't have to change anything.
That, but you just have to rethink about what are your goals in doing all those things. That's what you're talking about redeeming.
Yeah. It's you're taking something that was an end unto itself and turning it into a means to a greater end.
Right. And that's worth doing.
Yeah. It just takes some intentionality. I think so often, I really think this is a hindrance. So often when we think of generosity, we think of giving, we think of it in institutional terms. We think of it in terms of giving to the church, going to church events, and serving on a committee or serving on a board or serving as a volunteer or something like that for one of those church events. And if we can break out of that mindset and see life as ministry, the pastors being there to equip us for ministry. And so there are certain times when we go to be equipped.
Yeah.
And yet we disperse from those times. We go out into the world, and it's kind of just an issue of redeeming different aspects of our lives and our time, our talent, treasure, and turning those into generous offerings to God for the advancement of the gospel. And just maybe even just tweaking some things that we're doing and doing them a little bit differently, not necessarily adding a lot more to your plate, but just doing everything that you do and do all that you do to the glory of God type of thing. That's just a really practical application of what Paul's saying there.
Right.
So I think that's really helpful because that sort of changes the paradigm a little bit. It makes us think through that differently. And it makes us. It's not
like this huge radical thing that, I have to completely change everything.
Or it's not like I'm having to cram 7 more things into my calendar.
Right, or have to figure out what I'm going to sacrifice that I don't want to. Like, it's simply just, it's moving your motive. Like, what's the true motive behind what you're doing?
Yeah.
Like, are you busy and doing the things you do because you want to advance the gospel? Or are you just, like you said, doing those things because they're an ends in it of themselves? So, I think it's simple. It's as simple as, have we been made new? If we've been made new, then you are the new creation. That spirit of fear and anxiety and things that keep us clinging on to everything or doing things that so people don't think less of us. That's all built around self-centeredness. Yeah. And as new creations, you don't have that anymore. Or you're not, I'm not saying
enslaved to that.
You're not enslaved to that anymore. You're not prone to that. It still has, we're still struggling with the issues that the flesh still has somewhat. It still clings to us, right?
It's new identity,
right? But you've got this
learning to live that out.
You have been set free from those things. You don't have to live by those things anymore. You can live with generosity in mind. You can live with the Great Commission in mind.
Yeah.
You can live with doing ministry in mind versus I've got my goals, I've got my things, I've got what I want to do. If you're still living by those things, then you really do have to question, am I that new creation that I think I am?
As you're saying that, and I think of Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, like, don't be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Yeah.
And that comes through offering your body up as a living sacrifice. We're these, I always make fun of Christian t-shirt companies. We were in Missouri and we were talking about that passage. I was like, oh, just wait. They're going to make a Walking Dead t-shirt. They did. Like, it showed up. I was like, gosh, this is horrible. But it really is. It's like you're in the world, not of the world. You're a new creation, new creature, your new identity. This is what it means to take up your cross daily and follow Jesus. This is what it means to be a living sacrifice. It means that everything in your life is held with open hands, and God can take and give and do whatever he wants to with it, because your life is centered around him and his glory, such that you're willing to generously let go of whatever it is that needs to be let go of so that he can be made much of.
So we see that he loved us in a way in which he sacrificed and was generous beyond what we are even capable of. And we're called to reflect that.
Yeah.
So we should have that same attitude of being sacrificial and caring about our brothers and sisters in the church that are believers, but also the community at large.
Yeah.
Because that's the same way that God loves us. So if you've been changed and you have that, you should reflect that too. And it's more than just your money.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We get so caught up, I think, in people giving sermons, and money's a part of it. I'm not trying to say it's not, but it's way more than that. It's your entire life.
Yeah.
It's just a way in which we're supposed to live.
It's not just money. It's your house and your car and your kids and your job and your, everything.
Right. And anything you do.
Yeah.
Like every moment, like we live in a sports culture here, and we live in a culture that's kind of obsessed with it. Okay. How do you minister in that culture?
Yeah.
You can't avoid it.
Yeah.
You can't go hide. Otherwise you're not actually with the people that you need to be with.
Yeah.
So you figure out how can I be a part of this?
Contextualization.
And there you go. We've talked about that before too.
All right. So, I think that's pretty good.
That wasn't what we were supposed to talk about.
That was nothing like what we were supposed to talk about, but I think that was good. It was, if you heard Joe's sermon, then this is just like recap, I guess.
Yeah.
And
or maybe it's better.
If not, we'll post a link to the sermon when it comes up on our Facebook page. Speaking of Facebook, you can follow us on Facebook, Pastor Discussions. You can email us at pastordiscussions@gmail.com. You can join our Facebook group and join the conversation there. And we're part of the Bar Podcast Network. You can go to thebarpodcast.com to get more great biblical content for your ear holes.
And we are 2 weeks away from Minneapolis now, right?
Yeah. So this is like
1 week.
This is 1 week.
We are 1 week. This is your last chance. Absolutely last chance.
We're sending an email out on like Wednesday. So this is your last chance to get signed up. Go to pastordiscussions.com/meetup. And we will hopefully see you in Minneapolis. I'm excited about that. Marino's coming.
Yeah, he'll be with us, so you'll get to meet Marino too.
The whole drive up, the whole drive back, and all the time in between.
It's a good thing our wives aren't coming. I think there's going to be some cigar smoke.
There might be some cigars. I have it on good authority that Marino snores like a log too. So
yeah, so we're putting him in his own room.
He's got his own room. But yeah, so next week I'm gonna be gone, and so we're not gonna be able to record. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna post the second session of Brian Croft's conference that he was a part of here at Arbor Drive. Was it like 6 months ago?
It was in September.
Yeah. So we'll post that next week, and so be checking that out and let us know what you think.
Yep.
Where do you struggle with being generous? Are there areas where you are particularly you find it particularly difficult to be generous? If so, why is that?
That's a really good question, because I think every one of us struggles in one of those three areas.
Some of us too.
Yeah, I'm saying, but
at least one.
At least one.
Yeah.
There's one that's harder to be generous than another. So.
Yeah, what's the one that's really hard for you?
Yeah.
So, sounds good, man.
Good question. All right, well, tune in next time. We'll be back, we promise.
Yes.
Unless we die.
Unless, Lord willing.
Okay. We'll catch you next time on the next episode of the Pastor Discussions podcast, your weekly conversation on doctrine, faith, and the Christian life.